I've heard from many people the first time they went to Eretz Yisrael, although they had no family, they had no prior connection or relationship with Eretz Yisrael, there was definitely a feeling of arriving back home. I myself had that when I went for the first time when I was 13. I remember getting off the plane not expecting this very deep hargasha, but there was a real sense of, okay, this is the home of the Jewish people. It's an incredible line the Sefer Charedim has when he speaks about the feelings of anticipation and yearning that we have naturally embedded in the neshama. Keben el cheik imo. Going to Eretz Yisrael is that same feeling as a child going into the lap of his mother. And that's why we find in the Gemara that the Amoraim would even kiss the dirt and the stones of the land because there was such a chavivus, there was this love. It wasn't just a national pride, it wasn't a cultural association, it was a very deep intuitive feeling that our connection with the Borei Olam, our relationship with Hashem, is most felt and expressed in Eretz Yisrael. This goes back, writes the Sefer Charedim, to Avram Avinu, that when he was first instructed to go to Eretz Yisrael, he didn't have that yearning, that tshuka, until he was actually there. Once he went, the first time, and he had to leave, and he had to wait 5 years to go back again. The Sefer Charedim writes that he had such an overwhelming desire to finally go back to Eretz Yisrael. Once he experienced it the first time, he needed it again. And because of this first impression, this first relationship that Avram Avinu had with the land of Eretz Yisrael, Mimenu nilmad ledoros enachnu yotzei chalotzov lios nichsofim kamohu. We learn, and it's been ingrained within us, that we also have this kisuf, this desire, afal pi sheyoshveh b'tzar, even though it might be difficult, even though it might be not as comfortable as other places outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's ingrained in the neshama going back 3,800 years ago to Avram Avinu. We know that Yerushalayim, tonight we observe Yom Yerushalayim, which is the 28th of Iyar, commemorating the incredible miracles that took place during the Six-Day War. And we know that Yerushalayim definitely has something special above and beyond the general Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. The halacha is, the Mishnah in Ksubas tells us, that if one spouse wants to make aliyah, they want to move to Eretz Yisrael, they could basically force the other spouse to move with them. And the Mishnah continues, Hakol malin Yerushalayim. Let's say we already live in Eretz Yisrael. However, I really want to move to Yerushalayim, and my wife, my husband, whatever the case is, says, I'd rather stay here in Netanya and Haifa. I don't want to go to Yerushalayim. It's too congested. Hakol mailin Yerushalayim. You're allowed to basically force the issue. Now, trying to encourage your spouse to move to Eretz Yisrael, we know once you're there, it's a mitzvah. Every moment you're in Eretz Yisrael, you're fulfilling the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. But once you're already living there, why do I have the right to force you to move to Yerushalayim? Explains the Avnei Nezer. He says it's true there's no technical obligation of living in Yerushalayim in contrast to any other place in Eretz Yisrael. But nonetheless, Mikol makom kiven yesh mitzvah lo dorsham yoser mi b'shar Eretz Yisrael malin. Since there's a special mitzvah of being and living in Yerushalayim doesn't explain really where it comes from or what it is or why Yerushalayim is unique. But that's why you have the right to force your spouse to move from Haifa, from Tel Aviv, to Yerushalayim. Now, parenthetically, if one person doesn't want to go, forcing them based on the Mishnah and Ksubis is probably not the most productive way of achieving Shalom Bayis. But that's what the halacha is. Yerushalayim itself is referred to, the Pasuk in Eicha, as a city that was, at least before the destruction, it was referred to as Klilas Yofi Misos L'chol Haaretz. It's of perfect beauty, it's the joy, it's the splendor of all of the earth. That's Yerushalayim. It also has a different description. David HaMelech refers to Yerushalayim as Ka'ir Shechubra Lo Yachtav, the city that's connected together. Shechubra Lo Yachtav. And the Gemara in Tainus explains what this means on a mystical level. It says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, Lo ovo b'Yerushalayim shel mala, I will not enter the Yerushalayim upstairs, ad she'ovo l'Yerushalayim shel mata, until I enter the Yerushalayim in this world. So the Gemara questions, Umi ika Yerushalayim lamala? What kind of Yerushalayim do you have lamala in Shemayim? The Gemara's answer is in. Of course we have Yerushalayim shel mala. Dichsev, because it says in Tehillim, Yerushalayim habanuya ka'ir shechubra lo yachtav. Yerushalayim is this very unique kedusha. It's an ir shechubra that's connected. What's connected to each other? Yerushalayim shel mala and Yerushalayim shel mata. So it's the source of beauty, it's misos kol haaretz, klilas yofi, and it's also a city that has this direct parallel between heaven and earth. Beyond this, the idea of all blessing and shefa and bracha that comes into this world, we're told that it actually goes through Yerushalayim. In the introduction of the Sefer HaChinuch, he speaks about different places, different nations. He says, on planet Earth, there's a particularly special place called Eretz Yisrael. And within Eretz Yisrael, Gam ba'oso hatov shabohu Yerushalayim. Within that goodness is something that's even on a higher madrega, it's elevated. That's Yerushalayim. And that's why this was the place chosen for the Beis HaMikdash, for the Avoda. And then he throws in this incredible line, Umimena yisborach kol kadur ha'oretz. And from it, from Yerushalayim, the entire globe of the earth is blessed. Kishom tziva Hashem es habracha. Because Hashem commands his bracha there. Whatever bounty, shefa, parnasa, somehow it's all going through Yerushalayim and then across the globe. It's beautiful. It's mechuber yachtav. It's paralleling heaven and earth, and it's the source of all blessing. Now, if you had to really rate all of the cities of Israel, would you say Yerushalayim is the most beautiful city? No. Probably not. Right? Just to be objective and honest, Netanya is gorgeous. Right? Tel Aviv, different places by the water. Is Yerushalayim the most beautiful city? What's the deeper meaning of David HaMelech when he says that, actually this is from the verse in Eicha of Yirmiyah, that Yerushalayim is the Klilas Yofi. What's so incredibly beautiful about Yerushalayim? How is it, or when is it mechuber yachtav? The Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is only willing to enter Yerushalayim Shel Mala once I enter Yerushalayim Shel Mata. Well, how do we make that happen? How do we bring Hashem into Yerushalayim down here in order for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to enter Yerushalayim Shel Mala? So I want to explore briefly, where did Yerushalayim get its name from? Why is it called Yerushalayim? So there's a very interesting Medrash Rabbah that says when Avram Avinu had his nevuah, his encounter with Hashem, he referred to Yerushalayim as Hashem Yireh, that Hashem will see. Shem, right, one of the sons of Noach, referred to Yerushalayim as Sholem, like it says, Umalki Tzedek Melech Sholem. So we have two different ideas for what to name Yerushalayim. We have Yira, that was Abraham's suggestion, and then we have Sholem, that was the thought of Shem. So what do? Right? One set of parents says, if you have a boy, it might be nice to call him Shlomo. But Maisa, you know how much it would mean to us and the family. And the other set of parents, if you have a boy, it might be nice to call him Zalman. You know our relationship with Zaydia. So what do? Call him Shlomo Zalman. Incredible. Now the Chazon Ish would say you're accomplishing nothing by doing that because it's neither name, but Ramosha held that was a good way of creating shalom in the family. Fine. So, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Medrash Rabbah records, the decision to call this special place on earth, Yerushalayim, was a combination between the name given by Avram Avinu and the name given by Shem. Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim. Okay. Nice to have that shalom that was created. What's the deeper meaning of this? Besides wanting to make Avraham and Shem both feel good, the Meshech Chachma has a very powerful insight into this chazal. The Meshech Chachma explains that Yira and Shem were different kochos of the neshama, a different focus of our avodas Hashem. Shem was more the Baal Hergish. He was emotional. He was invested in a life of chesed. That was the turning point in his life, living in this warped reality of the Teva where 24/7 he was selfless, he was giving, he was caring, he was sensitive to all different types of creatures. And then you had Avram Avinu, who was more the intellectual. He discovered the Borei Olam in a way that no human being understood until that time. So Shem explains the Meshech Chachma. He was coming more from the hergish, the heart, the neshama, that fire. And Avram Avinu was coming more from the seichel, the intellect, the power of truth. Although we know Avram was midas chesed, but even the chesed was coming from an understanding of Hashem and what Hashem wants from us in this world. Yerushalayim is Yireh Shalem. It's a combination of both of these forces, right? Coming together, b'chibur, they're connected as one, demonstrating the ideal service of Hashem. It's both intellectual and it's emotional. That's what the Meshech Chachma says. I remember hearing from Rabbi Beryl Wine. He was a rabbi in Miami for many, many years. And he was living here in 1967 during the Six-Day War. And it was that unforgettable Wednesday. He says he remembers vividly driving down the street in Miami and in a place where the vast majority of people, at least then, were Jewish. and they were all listening to their radio, trying to be being kept updated on what was happening in Israel. If you haven't researched some of the basic historical background of the Six-Day War, I encourage you to do so. Because analyzing the threat, right, the level of destruction and calamity that Israel thought it was facing, digging thousands upon thousands of graves, taking over parks to use them as cemeteries. And then within literally a few hours, the Nisim Guluyim, the open miracles that took place, learning history about the Six-Day War is just seeing the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it was on that Wednesday, the 28th of ER, Rabbi Wein says he was driving down in Miami. Everyone was driving slowly because it was clear they were listening to the radio. And it was at that moment that they found out something that we never anticipated. We never assumed would happen. We weren't sure if we would survive this war as a nation and as a country. And then we hear those famous words, Har Habayit Beyadenu. We have the Har Habayis, the Temple Mount. He said at that point, pretty much every car just came to a stop. He said that we walked out of our cars and we just embraced each other. Total strangers in the middle of the street, just embracing each other, hearing about this incredible nace that just happened in Eretz Yisrael. There was such a sense of almost messianic anticipation. You see the Yad Hashem so clearly, the ability of the Air Force to supernaturally destroy hundreds and hundreds of Egyptian planes before they're able to take off. Unfortunately, though, that wasn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu fully coming back to Yerushalayim. So what do we need? What do we need to bring Hashem back to Yerushalayim Shalmata, to enable HaKadosh Baruch Hu to enter Yerushalayim Shalmala? Listen to the words of the Malbim. The Malbim, when he's commenting on this pasuk in Tehillim, Yerushalayim habenuya ke'ir shechubra lo yachtav. Towards the end of this paragraph, right, we have many famous psukim where David HaMelech is davening for the peace of Yerushalayim, Leman achai v'reyai, adabra na, shalom bach. On behalf of my brothers and all of my friends, I just want peace. Says the Malbim, Im ohavei Yerushalayim yeh beinehem shalva penimis, bizeh tolui shalom Yerushalayim. If those who love Yerushalayim have an internal love and tranquility within themselves, meaning amongst each other, the peace of Yerushalayim is dependent on the peace that the Ohavei Yerushalayim and the love that the Ohavei Yerushalayim have, not for Yerushalayim, but for each other. Acher she'ikar inyan Yerushalayim hi ha'achtos ha'umah. Incredible line of the Malbim. What is the ikar of Yerushalayim? Why do we always focus and mention Yerushalayim so many times a day in tefillah, in benching? Because Yerushalayim represents, it's the expression of Achdus Ha'umah, of the unity of the nation. A sense of total togetherness of Klal Yisrael. Ve'im kein yisorer bein ishehem riv u'madanim u'pirud levavos. If chas v'shalom we have amongst those people who are Ohavei Yerushalayim, they love Yerushalayim, but we don't love each other. And there's a sense of tension and friction. Lo nimtza shalom Yerushalayim. There's no way to have shalom Yerushalayim. Ki ikar shlomahi imhi ke'ir shechubra lo yachtav. The fate and the destiny of Yerushalayim says the Malbim, is dependent on the shalom beinenu, the love and the peace between all of those who love Yerushalayim. And I think this really helps us understand, first of all, why is it referred to as the most beautiful city on the planet? Right? Maui's nice. There's some gorgeous places out there. We used to go in the summer to Yosemite. Yosemite is gorgeous. You don't have waterfalls like that in Engedi. It's not the same. Klilas Yofi Mesos Koloritz, though, this special chen and beauty of Yerushalayim is the fact that it's mechuber yachtov. When there's an achdus that's able to exist within Yerushalayim, there's something special, there's a magic that happens, there's a fire that ignites. And that's the most beautiful thing in the world. That's mechuber yachtov. That's when Hashem says, I'm going to enter Yerushalayim, and when I do, I'll enter Yerushalayim Shalmala. So when is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will enter Yerushalayim Shalmata? That's when we make sure to be Mekayim, to fulfill the description of Yerushalayim, that it's mechuber yachdav, it's connected together through Klal Yisrael, being connected together. There's an incredible prophecy we have in Zechariah, where Zechariah says, in the name of Hashem, Ko Amar Hashem Tzavakos, Od Yeshvu Zakenim Uzakenos Berachovos Yerushalayim. There will be a time again where old men and old women will sit in the streets of Yerushalayim. Ve'ish mishonto biyodu merov yomim. You'll have people walking with the cane because of their old age. Urachovos ha'ir yemolu yeladim v'yelados misachim berechovoseha. And you'll have the cities filled with little boys and little girls playing and enjoying themselves. Rechovos ha'ir, in the streets of the city. Ko'omer Hashem tzavokos, ki yipole be'enei she'eris ha'om hazeh. It's true, this might be a pella, meaning Zechariah telling the nation, at a time of destruction, at a time of exile, I'm sharing with you the Devar Hashem. This is the message of the infinite Borei Olam, that there will come a time again where Yerushalayim will be our city. We'll be living there with a sense of tranquility and peace. How and when did we believe this prophecy? If you were living in the times of Yirmiyah, when he writes in Eicha, something else entirely was happening, Berachovos ha'ir, in the streets of the city. It wasn't old men and women walking, and it wasn't children playing. It was children dying. Bihishtapeich nafsha malchek imosa. Children starving and slowly passing away on the lap of their mothers. That's what we saw during the destruction. And then you fast forward hundreds and hundreds of years, going to the time of the Ramban, when the Ramban later on in his life made Aliyah. So he writes a famous letter to one of his sons. He says, I write this letter in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, Ki shevach v'hodah letzor yishi zechisi ubasi l'shalom b'yom tishi l'yerech elu. I thank Hashem for allowing me to arrive here in the holy city of Yerushalayim on the 9th of Elul. Uma agid lechem be'idyan haaretz. What can I tell you regarding the land? Ki rabba azuva v'godel hashemamon. It's desolate. It's abandoned. V'klolo shel davar, and the Ramban says a fundamental hashkafa. Kol ha'mekudish mechavero chorav yoser mechavero. The holier something is, or the holier something was, the higher it's elevated, the farther down it drops. Yerushalayim yoser charva minakol, and that's why Yerushalayim is yoser charva minakol. It's the most destroyed and desolate city in all of Eretz Yisrael. There are about 1,000 people living here altogether, about 300 Christians and some others. Ve'ein Yisrael b'socha, but there are no Jews here in Yerushalayim right now, in the 1200s. They had to flee during different persecutions. They ran for their lives to different areas of Eretz Yisrael. However, there are two brothers that got a place and they're trying to get a minyan together. That's pretty much all we have in Yerushalayim right now. And the truth is, we actually found a Bayis Chorov, a place of ruins. V'kipa yofe, with a nice kippah, dome. Ulekachnu osa lebeis knesses, so we actually took it as a beis knesses because the city is hefker, and anything you want to take, you're allowed to do so. Right? Fast forward 2024. A dira in Yerushalayim, 1.5 bedrooms with no bathroom, is $1.8 million. Okay? We sent messages to people in Shechem. They took Sifrei Torah with them when they left Yerushalayim. Hopefully they're going to bring one back. And it's an amazing thing to see, writes the Ramban, that there are many people, although they don't live in Yerushalayim, they come here from all throughout Eretz Yisrael, from Damascus and elsewhere. Liros Beis HaMikdash v'livkos elav, to see the place of the Beis HaMikdash, to mourn. Umi shezachinu liros Yerushalayim berchavona, and anyone who's zochet to see Yerushalayim in its present state of destruction will be zochet to see it bevinyona v'tikuna b'shuva leha kavod hashchina, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu returns, Emir Shemsu. The Ramban wrote this in the 13th century, and we've seen incredible nisim. Part of the celebration of Yom Yerushalayim is the recognition of the Yad Hashem in this entire process. Coming back to Eretz Yisrael is not something that makes sense al pi derech hateva. It's not something that has ever happened in the history of the human race. Any nation that was exiled and expelled from its land for thousands of years, they don't return. They die. They assimilate. They no longer exist as a distinct nation. The Ramban said they barely had a minyan in Yerushalayim. Now, presently living in Yerushalayim, you have close to 600,000 Jews. Now living in Eretz Yisrael, you have close to 8 million Jews. We're at a point in time where there's a historic shift happening, where the majority of the Jewish people, we're getting close to that point where the majority of the Jewish people are living in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yoshev, when he was a little boy, he was very close with his grandfather, the great Baal HaLeshem, who was known throughout the Torah world as an incredible Mekubal. Rabbi Yoshev, when he was only 13 years old, he wrote down many of the teachings of his grandfather in a sefer called Sefer HaKlalim, which the Baal HaLeshem described as a sefer that's omuk ma'od, it's very deep. Rabbi Yoshev often, when he would give his daily Gemara shir, he would refer to a story that was etched in his mind for many, many decades. In one particular case, they were learning a Gemara in Moed Katan regarding Kriya, the obligation of tearing one's clothing, different aspects of mourning, either personal loss or the mourning that we have on a national level. And he would recall the first time that he was zoche to go to the Kosel. He said he was a little boy and he went together with his grandfather, the Baal HaLeshem, and it was both of their first time. This was before in 1948. And he described the experience. If you've seen the old pictures, there wasn't that massive plaza, but there was like a very narrow hallway you would walk down. And he said, I was walking with my grandfather, and as we approached the Kosel, Govra hisrag shuso hamuchshis shel hasav hakodosh. The intensity of emotion that was pouring out of the Leshem was something that I could feel. I felt that energy. And as we got closer, the Baal HaLeshem broke out in tears, overwhelmed with emotion. And I was standing there as a young child, and I could testify, L'saras ha'hergush ha'azo, the incredibly powerful emotion that my grandfather had and expressed. And as we got closer to the Kosel, we were there for over 2 hours. My grandfather was crying and davening, lihishtateyach, pouring out his soul to Hashem. And then the Leshem had to go. That was the first time Rabbi Yoshev saw the Kosel. That was the first and only time his grandfather saw the Kosel. We know from 1948 to 1967, the Kosel was off limits. During the 6-Day War, Rabbi Yoshev found himself in a bomb shelter together with others. And for the first 2 days they were there, they had no clue what was going on. And he found himself a table, and he was learning Sanhedrin. One of the family members, a nephew or a cousin, he went outside with a few of his friends, and this was on Chof Ches Iyar, the 28th of Iyar, on that Wednesday. And they were standing in the street, and they saw the IDF jeeps all going towards the old city. And they saw Rabbi Gorin, who was the chief rabbi of the IDF, also in one of these jeeps with his shofar. They said, Makara. So one of the soldiers yelled out, did you hear, Bachurim, Hashmatim, Kovshu Esa Kosel? We got back the Kosel. So the way that this particular author describes what he felt when he first heard that no, Baruch Hashem, we're not going to be destroyed, and actually we got back the Kosel in Yerushalayim, he ran back to the bomb shelter wanting to share the incredible news with everyone who was there, and most importantly, he wanted to share it with Rabbi Yoshev. He says, though, as I started telling people and there was excitement and there were questions and I had no answers, there were so many details that people wanted, I saw Rabbi Yoshev there, and he was sitting as he did for the entire time in the shelter with focus, with intensity, but also with menuchas hanefesh, with a sense of serenity, totally absorbed in his learning not for himself, but obviously learning for Klal Yisrael. And he writes, I wasn't sure. I felt on one hand bad disturbing him because he was so engrossed in his learning. On the other hand, I knew I had to tell him. So I walked over and I said quietly, Kovshu Esa Kosel. We got back the Kosel. And he said, the way Rabbi Yoshev responded is something that I'll never forget. It's etched in my mind forever. He looked up from his Gemara, and he had the greatest, most radiant smile on his face, and tears streaming down. He said, Baruch Hashem, and went right back to learning. Now he concludes the piece by saying, don't think that this wasn't a big deal for Rebbe Yoshev, because Shavuos morning, 1967, that was the first time since seeing the Kosel as a little boy with his grandfather, Rebbe Yoshev was now zocheh to go back. And he said, I was there, standing with Rebbe Yoshev at his first encounter with the Kosel in so many years. And I could be made, I could testify that the emotion that Rebbe Yoshev had as he approached the Kosel again, he said it was like watching a Malach Hashem ascending to Shemayim. That inspiration that I got just by seeing Rebbe Yoshev feeling a sense of hakaras hatov, of being so grateful for the Yad Hashem, and getting back Yerushalayim, that's something I'll never forget. What's incredible is that our feelings towards Eretz Yisrael, our feelings towards Yerushalayim, our ongoing tefillah for Hashem returning to Yerushalayim and allowing this city to be the ear that's mechuber yachtav, that's connected together through the achdus of the nation, and once again regaining its status of Kalilas Yofi, Mesos Kol Haaretz, something that we daven for and we anticipate that should be soon in Mirz Hashem. Our relationship with Yerushalayim is indicative. It's symptomatic of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Torah. The Aderes, the great father-in-law of Rav Kook, he has a diary, Nefesh David, where he says, in his great humility, Rabbi Eliyahu David Rabinowitz Tu'umim, he says, I don't know where I'm holding spiritually. However, the one thing that gives me a sense of comfort, when I see there's simonim, there are indications of purity within my soul. When do I see these indications? He says, even though I've been through so much in my life, and he went through poverty, and he went through busha and humiliation, he and his wife lost children, but b'chol zeh ein davar asher yavieni lidei bechi tekef. There's nothing that brings me to tears immediately like the mentioning of Yerushalayim Ir Kadshenu. As soon as I think of Yerushalayim, as soon as I allow myself to feel Yerushalayim, I break down. When my children were younger, and I would speak to them, and I would be mechanech them, and I would mention a line like Neilech or Nizke Leilech LeBeis HaMikdash. I said, Mirz Hashem, soon we'll be zochet to go to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash. Teikif Alasar, right there on that spot, I would just start breaking down. And therefore he concludes, Mizeh niroa biruach tahara, Baruch Hashem, because of this, I see there's at least a little bit of purity in my neshama. We'll end with what the Gemara tells us in Brachos, that we know Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, he teaches us that there are 3 matanos tovos, great, incredible gifts from Hashem, that we only acquire through Yisurim. We only officially can attain them through suffering. Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. The Yisurim that accompany Eretz Yisrael, the pain, the anguish, the fighting that we've seen throughout our lives, and obviously especially right now after October 7th, these are the Yisurim that we believe can help us in the acquiring of Eretz Yisrael and the acquiring of Yerushalayim if we utilize it, if we channel the pain and we channel the frustration in a way that's creating more achdus. Rav Yisrael Meir Lau said that he remembers a conversation he had with his brother. His older brother, took care of him throughout the entire war. And he was there pretty much saving his life. That was a promise that he made to his father. And there was one point towards the end of the war where he had to separate from what he called Luluk. Right? Young Yisrael Meir was referred to as Luluk. So his older brother said, Luluk, you should know they're taking me right now. You understand that our father is dead and likely our mother is not alive as well. And I believe that I probably won't make it out of this Gehenna either. However, if some miracle happens that I'm saved and in Mirz Hashem you're going to be okay, whoever you meet, whoever you encounter, you should just tell them you want to go to Eretz Yisrael. and I'll meet you there, God willing. Eretz Yisrael, said Rabbi Lau, I was 7 years old at the time, and that was the first time in my life I heard that word, Eretz Yisrael. Baruch Hashem, Zechisi, Rabbi Lau writes that I was Zocha to survive together with my brother, and we did go to Eretz Yisrael together. And I remember often the words that my brother told me. He said, not only is Eretz Yisrael a special place where we could live as Jews, it's also a place where lo horgim Yehudim, where they don't kill Jews. And Rabbi Lau said that whenever I think of what my brother told me, Baruch Hashem zechinu shenenu lalos la'eretz Yisrael, we were both zocha to go together. However, the one thing that he mentioned has still not been fulfilled. Shesham lo horgim Yehudim. There they don't kill Jews. We'll end with the tefillah of Rabbi Lau, appreciating the beauty of Yerushalayim, the beauty of Achdus. It's the source of bracha for the entire world. It's the source of bracha for Klal Yisrael. It's a connection, direct connection between heaven and earth, and it seems like it's all based Yerushalayim, it's all based on bringing together facets of Avodas Hashem, but more practically and more importantly, bringing together the Jewish people. The prayer of Rabbi Lau is, Ani tefillah shenizkir lekabet es kol acheinu lemedinas Yisrael, le'eretz ha'ovos, the land of our fathers, v'nizkir lichyos b'medinas ha'yehudim k'yehudim, that we should be zoche to live in the land of Jews like Jews. V'nizkir she'achein lo yishofech od dam Yehudi be'eretz hazo. And in Mitzvah Hashem, what his older brother said, that they don't kill Jews in Eretz Yisrael, but it's a source of light and joy and beauty for the entire world. We should be zoche to see and experience soon. Shkoyach.